I didn't finish them. Now, does anyone have questions about anything we talked about last time? Okay. Let's continue about what's happening with the Industrial Revolution. All right. Now, one thing we see with the Industrial Revolution is we talked about these horrible conditions, and these horrible conditions are going to be primarily during what they call the early Victorian period. So that's going to be basically the 1830s through about 1851. At that time, there is no government regulation of the factories at all. Every factory owner is trying to make the most money they can on the backs of the workers. And as we talked about, the workers having a pretty miserable life. Each capitalist, the factory owner, is trying to make the most money he can, and the way you make the most money you can is to pay your workers the least possible and try to get the most work they can out of them. Now, the government starts getting involved by the end of the middle of the 19th century. So, by the mid-Victorian period, then the government starts passing things like the Factory Acts, and then they make the workhouses more commonly used. Now, we did talk about workhouses, right? Yeah, okay. So, one portrayal of what life is like during the Industrial Age. Now, the three places we most associate with the Industrial Revolution in Britain are going to be Manchester, Liverpool, and Glasgow. So now it links all three of these places together. They're all in the north. So the reason why they start building these factories in the north, much cheaper land. It's less desirable. Southern England, much more pleasant climate. I mean, I'm not going to say it's still particularly pleasant, but compared to the north, it is. So much cheaper land. They built places in Manchester, Liverpool, and then going further north into Scotland. So, so these are going to be the three places we most associate with the start of the Industrial Revolution. Now, one place where it really starts is going to be, it's about 25 miles away from Manchester, a place called Lancashire. So Lancashire is going to be known for these cotton mills. And that's really going to be, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but can I do the quiz? Because I was out last week.
I thought everybody took it already. I don't think I have any more of them. Take it next class.
Okay.
Okay, and can you please try to come right at the beginning of class to take it?
Yeah.
Or if you don't have a class before, maybe a little bit early?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you. All right, so yeah, so there are these three places, and so Lancashire is kind of near Manchester, but not quite there. So that's where the really large mills start, and the mills are going to be of different sizes. Really, some of the mills can get as large as about 170 workers. On average, most of them are going to have around 100 workers. So just to give you an idea of the size of these factories. Now, Gustave Doré is a French illustrator, and Gustave Doré creates an illustration that kind of shows what Manchester, it was a propaganda piece. It's making Manchester look a lot worse than it really was. Now, as we talked about before, it was pretty miserable living conditions, but he makes it even worse. He shows here in this work, Manchester at noon. I'm going to pass it around, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. that he's looking at Manchester at noon, where it's so dark, so crowded, so claustrophobic, you can't tell if it's noon or midnight. That much smog. And as you know, you look at the illustration, look at the billowy factories there, how close the houses are together. So no one had heard of Manchester, so suddenly that becomes what everybody thinks of with Manchester and the Industrial Revolution. And we often make these associations with places we haven't been. They get a certain reputation. So for example, Cleveland. Cleveland was so dirty in the 1970s that there was a whole barge full of trash that just caught on fire. So it became pictures of it around the world showing the Cuyahoga River so filthy and polluted that it just spontaneously caught on fire, the barge full of trash. So there are other places, Pittsburgh, you know, it always had this reputation of being, you know, filthy and grimy and kind of never outliving its coal era. But, you know, anyone's been to Pittsburgh recently, it's a pretty clean city. It's actually, I was surprised how much cleaner it was in Philadelphia, which isn't saying a whole lot. You know, we're not called Filthydelphia for no reason. But, or another place, Erie. No one thinks of, oh my God, let's go on a family vacation to Erie or Detroit. Now, Detroit, the Detroit River, actually very beautiful looking. I was there in Windsor, Canada, right across the other side of the Detroit River, and it actually reminded me a little of Biscayne Bay in the Miami area. So it shows you never know. But suddenly it solidified this idea that Manchester is filthy, the Industrial Revolution is, you know, grimy, dirty, and no room to breathe. So all of these associations. Now, things do begin to get better in the factories by the middle of the 19th century, by what they call the mid-Victorian period. Because then the government starts getting involved and starts regulating it. Now, things were so bad in the factory system that more people died from respiratory disorders and poisoned water than they did from any war. So it's really wreaking havoc on the population. But the capitalist who owns what Marx calls the means of production, the factory, making tons and tons of money off of it. So they're fighting not to change anything. And that's going to be, you know, why Marx focuses so much of his argument there in the situation of the factory system in England. Now, he does like a kind of a history of the world in his book Das Kapital, Capitalism, that kind of looks at class conflict in all periods, but it's going to be that period of the early Victorian period that really sets him off. Because it's, you know, we talk about how bad the living conditions are. Now, it doesn't have to be like that, because we're going to see, or we're going to see if it does have to be like that. Let's look at another kind of factory that emerges during the early Victorian age. Now, this factory is going to be started by Robert Owen. Robert Owen is known as the father of British socialism. So he's actually the first British socialist. And what is a big difference is in Manchester, they're all capitalists. Now, a capitalist is all about, as suggested in the name, making money. Capital's money. So you're trying to make the most money as you can, no matter what it does to people. And the government's saying that's a good thing because everybody should be following their own self-interest of trying to make the most money you can. And that did make Britain the richest country in the history of the world. So it worked, but at what cost? Now, So Robert Owen's the father of British socialism, but as a socialist, he's going to have a different goal than a capitalist. A capitalist is all about making the most money you can. A socialist is all about what's best for the majority of the population. So capitalism is all about competition. Socialism is all about cooperation. All right, so where can we see competition in capitalism? Where do we see it even today in a capitalist system? Yeah.
Different companies making the same product.
Good. Different companies making the same product. Yeah. So, Burger King versus McDonald's. Basically the same product, or you want to do the high-end Shake Shack versus Five Guys. They're competing with each other, basically the same product. So also we see people competing for jobs. And once you get out of here, you're going to be competing for jobs. There's going to be fewer jobs than people available for them. So the best of you are going to get the best jobs. The ones that are not as good, a so-so job, and those who are not very good will probably be in a different industry or relying on the government. Well, we hope not. But that's how competition works. Okay, so same thing here with the factory system. So they're all competing with each other to make the lowest priced products at the best quality. Now, Robert Owens, as a socialist, he has a different goal. He's not interested in making money. He doesn't care if he makes any money or not. He's interested in creating the best kind of factory that he can make for people and still stay in business. All right, so let's see what makes Robert Owen's factory different. Well, Robert Owen is going to buy up some land in a place called New Lanark, Scotland. New Lanark is in the Highlands of Scotland. It's about 35 miles from Edinburgh. And he could get a lot of land for a low price. Because traditionally rural land doesn't cost as much as land anywhere near a city. So he's going to start his own factory, a textile factory. All right, since he bought up all that land, he says, look, we don't have, most people would probably rather live with their own family than live in a big dorm with 60 other people. So he gives each worker their own cottage throughout the factory system. Okay. Now, he says the workers are working so many hours a day in the Manchester factories, and we all know if you work more than a certain amount of hours, what's the quality of your work going to be like? It's like if somebody tries to cram for an exam and stays up all night, is it going to be your best quality work? Or, I'm sure we've all done papers where we've done that. It's a deadline. I remember doing that. I stayed up all night and cranked out an 11-page paper. It was probably the worst paper I ever did. Okay, so he realizes this and he says, I'm going to have my workers work 8 hours instead of 16 like they are in Manchester. That way, they'll have enough energy to do their work and do it to the best of their ability. Okay. Now, he also decides he doesn't want children to work in factories. He said children, now he's starting his factory system, by the way, in the 1819. So vastly different time than, it's still firmly in the time of the early Victorian period. So it's competing with these Manchester ones. Now, he says children can learn the most when they're young. You recall things more, you're more interested in the work, you can just learn it much better when you're young than when you're older. So he says to have the children reach their potential, he doesn't want them working in the factories till they're at least age 14. Everywhere else in Manchester, they have them working starting at age 7. So he even opens up schools. So he says this helps them reach their potential. They'll be better, more knowledgeable workers. They'll be better citizens. So he says, I'm going to open up schools for them. So none of his workers' children are going to be working in the factories. They're just going to be in school till age 14. Okay? Now, he sees a lot of his workers are always worried about not having enough money. Now, if you don't have enough money, are you going to really be able to concentrate on anything else? If your bills are coming in and you just don't have really enough to pay them no matter what you do, what are you going to be concentrating on all the time? The quality of your work or the fact that you have no money? That's what you're thinking about all the time. You wake up in the middle of the night, you're so nervous about it, you can't get back to sleep, so you're going to be a lousy worker the next day, because you're always concerned about your money. So he says, I'm going to start paying my workers better so they don't have to worry about money all the time. Okay? So he starts paying them more. Now, another thing that he starts doing is he notices his workers are hungry a lot. They're tired after they're working all day. They don't want to cook. They don't have time to get food and make food, and they're just hungry all the time. So he says, I'm going to open a free cafeteria where they can eat as much as they want, whenever they want, go in there. So, kind of like here. And that way they're able to focus on their task, making the best product they can. If you have that, you have that, yearning for a Snickers bar and you don't get that Snickers satisfaction, that's what you're going to be focusing on, not your task at hand. So he makes it possible they can eat whenever they feel like. Okay? Now in Manchester, everybody works 6 days a week. The other day, Sunday, is the only day they have off, and Sunday you spend it mostly in church, where they're constantly telling you how good you have it and how you're serving God by working hard, and that your work's going to help you get into heaven, and all of that. But that doesn't give you much to enjoy in life. All you're doing is either working or praying. So he says people need weekends off. So he has his workers only working 5 days a week. Then they have the weekends off. But as the biblical saying goes, idle hands are the devil's plaything. What might you be doing with those hands if you are not working? So he comes up with, quote unquote, constructive things for people to do with their idle hands. He brings in magicians and theater troupes and entertainers to sing for them, and gives people something to look forward to. Now, another thing that he notices is when people are sick, they come into work even though they're sick, and then what happens? It would be like a server. Most of their money comes from tips, not their, $2.12 an hour. So do they have money not to come in because they're not feeling well? No. So they come in, they just infect everyone else around them, and then the whole place is sick. Okay, so he says, you don't feel well, stay home. He doesn't dock them at all. And he even brings in doctors to help them if they're, really sick. So he's creating a completely different kind of factory system. Now, the Owens model sure sounds like a whole lot better place to work, right? Can anyone see any potential problems with this? How well is this going to do in the open marketplace? Are they going to be able to produce goods for the same price? Yeah.
They're not gonna be able to produce goods for the same price because they're further away, like from like the.
Okay, right. So shipping it's going to be more.
Yes.
Okay, no, that's a good point. But even beyond that, what else about their model is going to make it harder?
Because the people are working less, they're making less. Of
Right, they're making less. They're not going to be able to make the same amount of products. Any other problem with this model?
They're paying them more.
Yeah, so that's all going to go into the price of the goods. Now, can they price at the same price as a sweatshop Manchester made good? No. So if they price it higher, but then they show their workers are happier, so they put a little tag showing a smiling worker petting a goat, are people going to be willing to pay more for the shirt then? No. Are we any better? Are we picking products where the workers are well paid and places where they treat them well? No. We're looking for the lowest price. We don't care how they treat their workers. We don't care if they have the people making our iPhones, they're working 20 hours a day, and if they work 20 hours a day for 1,000 years, they're not going to be able to afford one of them. Is that stopping us from buying them? No, we still want them. Look at where our products are produced. They're basically almost everything in China. We're not getting anything made in America because American labor costs too much. We don't want to pay that. Now, I'm not going to say nothing. There are some kind of handcrafted goods. You go to, festivals. Here it's the fall. I'm sure we're all going to be going to some festivals, and you're going to buy a handmade goods, but that's kind of like for fun or a luxury item. It's not for your everyday things. Orvis, the sports wear company, they actually tried about 10 years ago to make a catalog where they were only American-made goods. Big failure. For example, they made Docksiders, the boat shoes. Now, normal ones made in China, I don't know, $75 maybe. They were selling them made up in Maine by Rancourt for about $3.50. Or shirts. Instead of a normal one made in India for $70, they started making them in America, somewhere in, I think, North Carolina, for $250. Now, are most people either going to be willing to or able to spend that much for items? No. So the big thing is a big failure. I personally benefit from it. For them, when they marked down all that stuff, I was like real happy to grab it at a good discount. But a lot of people just didn't care. They just want the lowest prices. So it's going to be even more so 200 years ago. All right, so Owens Factory, you feel bad criticizing it because think how much better a world it would be if we all could have jobs that took care of us like that. But in the open marketplace, it failed. After about 2 years, he went bankrupt. But he does get to try it again. He tries the same model in America. He opens up a factory in Chalfont. Now, that would actually make it more interesting, but no, he opens it up in Indiana. So they're among the hardworking Hoosiers of Indiana. He tries the same model. That only lasts about 2 years, too. Now, so he writes about his experiences in a book he writes called The a new view of society. All right, so now let's look at another critic of the Industrial Revolution, Charles Dickens. Now, Dickens starts off as actually what they call a serial writer. So he writes his works in a series, like for magazines. Now, the reason he starts many of his books that way is because that way more people can afford to read them. Now, today we take books for granted because we have libraries, and but at this time, libraries were, rich people would have their own collection of books in their own private library. But if you were middle class, you would pay to join a lending library, like we might have a Netflix subscription today. But if you were poor, you kind of get the shaft as usual. So you wouldn't be able to afford books. So with that, out the ability to afford books, you often wouldn't bother to learn how to read. Well, guess what? That would then help keep you in poverty. Karl Marx talks about that. He calls it reifying your class position. So not much social mobility possible without literacy. But it would be like if the only car available were a Rolls Royce and we knew we couldn't afford one, would most of us bother to learn how to drive? No, there'd be no purpose. All right, so Dickens tries to make his books affordable, so he starts publishing them in magazines where they come out every week, every 2 weeks. Now, to sell something that way, you would have to end it on an exciting note. So he's what they call or he starts off as what they call a serial writer. So it always ends up on something exciting, because if it isn't exciting, you're not going to buy the next chapter. And we see serial writing often with movies, like Final Destination, part 1. Now, if they ended on something boring, nobody would bother to go see part 2. Or the most famous serial television show in history, the Who Shot JR episode of Dallas. And I remember that, the early 1980s. Everyone almost couldn't wait for the summer to end because you wanted to see Who Shot JR. They were talking about it all summer long. So people really excited about what's going to happen next. So that's the way Dickens wrote. All right, so does anyone know any books by Dickens? What are some books that he wrote? I think I gave you one of them last class.
Oliver Twist.
Oliver Twist, good. What else?
Tale of Two Cities.
Tale of Two Cities. These are the best of times. These are the worst of times. So talking about the French Revolution. Good. Now, I'm sure there's one work by Dickens that everybody has seen. The Christmas Carol. So many different forms of it. All right, well, let's look at how that could be seen as a criticism of the Industrial Revolution. All right, well, one thing we see is, Ebenezer Scrooge, the capitalist, the ultimate capitalist, and Scrooge, to make the most money he can, he pays his workers less than anyone else. He keeps their offices really cold, even if people have to wear coats all day long to save money. He keeps the lamps down low, not for romantic ambiance, but to save money, so he doesn't waste any oil. Who cares if your workers' eyes are strained? By the time they're shot, their eyes, he'll be out of business anyway. Or he won't need them as his workers anymore. Okay, now people come, now he's a really rich man because he's so good at, not spending. And he doesn't treat himself any better. So he's not one of these ones who I'm going to treat everybody else miserable, but, spoil myself. He doesn't treat himself well. He lives very, very frugally. He eats in a restaurant where he gets like the toughest cut of meat. And who cares if it takes him 30 minutes to gnaw at it when he could afford something that's, soft and buttery? He saved money. That's his only goal. Okay, now people come into his office and they ask him for donations to help the poor. His answer, is there something wrong with the workhouses? Aren't the workhouses in existence anymore? And they tell him, look, people don't even want to be in the workhouses. It's so dangerous there. The conditions are so terrible. They'd rather take their chance out on the street. And he's like, well, that's their choice then, isn't it? Good day. Bah humbug. Okay? Now he gets really upset when his workers ask for Christmas off. The one day a year they want off. And he's like, is that fair to pick a gentleman's pocket every 25th of December? Now, if I didn't pay you for one day's work, you'd think I'm cheating you. Why aren't you cheating me by expecting to be off for Christmas? Okay, so real nice guy. Well, he starts getting visits from, at first, the ghost of Christmas Past. Does anyone remember what the ghost of Christmas Past shows them?
Candle.
Huh?
What?
What does the ghost of Christmas Past show?
They come and they show his past and how he was poor as a kid. And,
Yeah, but he was happy, right? He had a girlfriend. He cared about her. She cared about him. He had a kind boss who, let them have the days off, and he tried to throw a simple party with, simple cakes and beer, and everyone was happy. Okay, good. Then who's he get to visit from the next night?
Christmas present.
Okay, Christmas present. What does Christmas present show?
The people having fun at Christmas now and how.
Okay, so it shows how he's affecting other people. He shows his workers. One has a lame boy, sweet little boy, but he's going to die because he can't get medical care, and they're all making the best they can of a miserable situation, and he begins to feel like a little bad. But then he finally gets the third apparition, the ghost of Christmas Future. What does that show? Yeah. Tiny Tim, right? Little peghead. Peg.
Because they can't take care of him without any type of medical assistance. And then Scrooge dies.
Okay.
Nobody, is
Right,
upset about
right.
it.
So it shows his. But then, all right. I mean, why would that be so upsetting? We all know we're going to die. I mean.
Nobody is upset. Everybody's pretty happy about it because he's a horrible person.
Exactly. Nobody mourns him. Nobody says a word over him. They just dump his body in the ground with basically no one there, grab all his stuff and sell it in the pawn shop to get whatever money they can, and then it's like he never was there. So how could this be seen as a criticism of capitalism? Yeah.
Capitalists don't really accomplish anything in their life except for making other people miserable, and they come and they die, and who cares?
Okay, now that's definitely true. And was it for any real purpose? I mean, the days of the pharaohs are gone. You can't bring the money with you into the next life. They don't believe that by the 19th century. So what was this, doing without and saving and making everyone miserable and living this harsh, horrible life when you didn't have to really for? It doesn't benefit anyone. So that's what it is. It's a big criticism. The only time he's happy is going to be at the end, when he realizes the only importance in life is the happiness you can bring others and the joy, and that's when he starts really enjoying himself and starts spending money, helping others, using his money for to give people a decent life. So that's an example. Now, Oliver Twist, same thing, another criticism of the capitalist system, because Oliver never did anything, and he still lives this miserable life, and things are so bad he has to basically learn how to be a clever thief as the only way to exist. And he was a good, decent person, but because of the system around him and his inability to live a decent life, that's the only way he can survive. So it's a strong criticism of capitalism. Okay, so any questions with anything with the Industrial Revolution? All right, so let's move on to our next topic. This is going to be leading us into the kind of what's happening after Napoleon. All right, so we had Europe completely scared to death after Napoleonic conquests. What they were so worried about was they saw that a dictator like Napoleon could take over their countries, obliterate their culture, and dominate everything. That there wasn't anything they could do about it. So there's a sense of helplessness. In reaction to the Napoleonic conquests, we see the rise of what's called, number 4 here, hyper-nationalism. Okay, hyper means excessive. What is nationalism? How would you define that? I want to tell everybody this is supposed to be a lecture discussion class. Don't expect any great class participation grades if I don't see more participation. Yeah?
Hypernationalism is kind of like an excessive love for your nation.
Okay, so love for your nation, not a bad thing, but how could this be bad to overly love it?
Just like thinking like the way you do things is better than the way that other people do.
Perfect, yes, exactly. That the way you think, do things is the only way or the best way, and that, but then you don't respect anybody else's way of doing things. And remember, we saw that with Napoleon. As he takes over these other countries, he basically disrespected them. He automatically assumed that everything French was automatically the best and didn't have any understanding, knowledge, or care about any other ways of doing things. All right, so that's kind of what we began to see in Europe in response to the Napoleonic conquests. So they start emphasizing their own national histories, their own cultures, their own ways of doing things. But in doing that, making it hyper or excessively so, they are not respecting anybody else's. So they're all becoming more and more self-centered. Before that, there wasn't this really big focus on nationalism. They were more kind of pan-European. They basically just saw themselves as having a lot in common with other Christian nations in Europe. Now, the big fear they had was another dictator could come to power and completely obliterate their culture and whole way of doing everything. So in reaction to that hyper-nationalism, what we began to see was an attempt to try to make sure that no one nation can become too powerful. Now, so what you're going to see is a meeting of the 5 great powers of Europe in the year 1815. Now, so there's going to be what's called the number 7 here, the Congress of Vienna. At the Congress of Vienna, the 5 most important powers in Europe are going to meet and try to devise a way that make it so that no one nation can become too powerful. So they want to limit the power of any one particular country so that another dictator like Napoleon can't take over. All right, the person in charge, okay, so what do we mean by a Congress? A Congress is a group. So the Congress of Vienna is going to be this group that meets in Vienna and tries to come up with a way to prevent any one nation from becoming too powerful. Because that's what they're afraid of. They all feel, wait a minute, this not like Napoleon can come to power, what's to stop another one from doing the same thing? And they were worried their whole way of doing things could be obliterated. Now, the leading so the five great powers, number 6 here, are going to meet in Vienna, Austria in the year 1815. Now, who do you think would make up the five great powers of Europe? Who should definitely be on that list?
France.
Okay, France, good. Britain, good. Italy's a good guess. I would have thought them too, but no.
Russia.
Russia, yeah, you can have the biggest country in Europe not on the list. Okay, Russia. This one rhymes with Russia. It's not a country that exists anymore.
Prussia.
Prussia, okay. So where would Prussia be today?
Like Germany.
Germany, yeah. So France, Britain, Russia, Prussia, and where is the Congress meeting? This will give us some indication of the last country. Where's Vienna? No. Austria, right. So those are the five great powers of Europe. France, Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Yeah,
If there were so many countries in Europe, why did they only choose 5?
because those were the leading ones. Those were the most important ones who made the decisions. They're going to be the ones that they're worried could take over and become like Napoleon. They're not going to be worried about Italy because it's too divided and small. Spain wasn't seen as much of a military power, so they didn't worry about them. And all the other ones are kind of small. Or insignificant. Good question, though.
What year did they meet?
1815. All right, now the leading diplomat there at the Congress of Vienna is going to be a man by the name of number 5 here, Clemens von Metternich. Now in German, the V's are pronounced F, so it looks like to us like von, but it's von. So Clemens von Metternich was the leading diplomat at the number 7 here, the Congress of Vienna, where the 5 great powers attended. And Metternich's going to come up with a way to try to make it so that no one nation can become too powerful. So what does Metternich do? Metternich is going to come up with his first idea was what's called the Congress system. And here's how the Congress system works. It's dealing with only the 5 great powers of Europe. And if any one of the 5 great powers attacked another great power, a 3rd great power would step in and stop it. They would send in the military to break it down. If that didn't work, a 4th great power would come in to try to stop it. And if even that didn't work, a 5th great power would go in to try to stop it. Now, would you say that sounds like a good idea or not so good? Or why not? What's wrong with it?
Who's gonna volunteer to be the first great power?
Okay, no, that's definitely a problem. Good point. Anything else wrong with it? Well, our place is gonna get involved if there's nothing they're gonna personally gain from it. See, that would often determine who would go in. Is it a country that you like? You know, if so, you wanna defend them. If it's, or one you don't like, you wanna go to the other side against them. So they're not gonna be neutral, right? Okay, so that could be a problem.
How are they inserting themselves into stopping them? Like, are they picking a side and trying to essentially help them win, or are they not picking a
No,
side?
they're not picking sides, they're trying to just break it up. But our country's gonna be willing to do that if there's nothing they can gain from it. I mean, look at the US, you know, we kind of butt in around the world a lot, over the years. Do we pick everywhere or just certain areas? And if so, what areas are we picking and why? For example, notice we like to get involved in the Middle East a lot. Could there be a reason for that? Does the Middle East have anything we want? Would we be as interested if we were in the post-oil period?
No.
No. After that, we probably couldn't care if they blew each other out of existence. What about Africa? I mean, look at some of the massacres that happened there. Have we always gotten involved in it?
No.
No, because there's nothing there we want. We took it already 100 years ago. So is it going to be any better here? Are they just going to get involved if there's nothing they can gain from it? And is that going to be an easy sell to your people? Do people going to be willing to die for a cause that has nothing to do with them? Are people going to be willing to use up your political capital in forcing people to get involved in something that you're not gaining anything from? No. So, or, you know, just think of a regular fist fight. If two people are fighting, what's going to happen if you kind of get there in the middle of it? You're going to get, is either side going to appreciate it, or are you going to be hated by both sides then? You're going to get hit by both sides. So that system doesn't work so well. All right, so the Congress system started there at the Congress of Vienna, lasts from 1815 to 1820. Then Metternich's going to come up with what's called the concert system, or also known as the Concert of Europe. Well, what do we mean we say something's in concert? Together. What is a concert? It's people performing together. So the concert system, it's going to be the idea, it's going to still deal with the five great powers, but instead of sending in the military might, each of the great powers, if there's a fight between two of the great powers, they're going to send in diplomats to talk to both sides to try to mediate it. And if it doesn't work with one of them, then a second one's going to send in diplomats to try to broker a deal with both sides. And if even that doesn't work, a fifth great power will send in more diplomats to try to make a deal with both sides. Now, do you think that's going to work or not? Okay, why not?
Just because if they're fighting, they're not just gonna really listen to people who just wanna talk to them and figure out why they're fighting.
I'm sorry.
I just feel like if two nations are fighting against each other, someone stepping in from outside that's just gonna talk to them and help them fix it is not
Right.
really gonna solve anything.
Oh, okay. Because they're not going to necessarily listen to them. They don't have any real power, right? you know, they're essentially a paper tiger, so it's a lot of roar, but without any backbone behind it to do anything. Now, surprisingly, it's actually going to work. It keeps the peace in Europe for about 50 years. So it lasts all the way till 1870s. Later on in the course, we'll see how the whole thing falls apart. Okay, guess we will leave it with that for today then. All right, so as I said, I should have these ready for you